Hi, I'm Ken Dolan-Del Vecchio, and this is the Pet Loss Companion broadcast. I'm here with my friend and colleague and coworker and co-author, I should say. Not co-workers anymore, but we've worked for many years. Nancy Saxton-Lopez. And this is an opportunity to bring the learning that we gained over many years of facilitating pet loss support groups to a broader audience through the magic of video and podcast technology. And it is a way also for us to take the information that we shared within our book, The Pet Loss Companion, Healing Advice from Family Therapists Who Lead Pet Loss Groups, to a broader audience. And so this, if you're not with us live, but you're listening to us on podcast or watching the video replay, we're happy to have you with us. And please consider sending us your questions and comments. And you can reach me at kenddv@gmail.com. So Ken and then my three last initials, ddv@gmail.com. And Nancy at nsaxtonlopez. So her name as you see it on the screen, but minus the hyphen, at csmpc.com. csmpc.com. Also let you know that this program is a friend of Dakin Humane Society in Springfield, Massachusetts. Dakin is a 501c3 community-supported animal welfare organization that provides shelter and medical care and spay-neuter services, along with behavioral rehabilitation for more than 20,000 animals and people every year. Since its inception in 1969, Dakin has become one of the most recognized nonprofit organizations in central Massachusetts and a national leader in animal welfare. You can learn more about Dakin and make a donation at dakinhumane.org, and that's DAKINHUMANE.org. I highly recommend that you take a look at their website. They're a wonderful organization, and we're very happy to have a friendship with them. And I actually get my pets from them. So Nancy, why don't you get us started for today?
Okay. Tonight we were going to talk about death and spirituality and different people's beliefs and thoughts and norms, but we actually got some folks, two people who had written to us, and their loss, but both losses were very tragic and complicated and complex. And we thought, instead of our regular program we were going to do, that we would actually talk about these two young women or women with their dogs. And they gave us permission to do so. So, because we think that's a good, talking points, about how what happened and how they were dealing and what was going on, and that might be something that people will get, viewers will get something out of.
Yeah, and we encourage you, if you send us questions, when you send us questions or comments, just let us know if it's okay to bring to the broadcast, because almost invariably the questions that we'll bring are ones that are complicated or representative of many people's concerns. And the responses that we give to you, we will respond to you directly via email, but the responses that we give to you can be sometimes broadened in the broadcast, and they will invariably touch other people's circumstances as well. So we're going to first talk about a question that we got from Bree. And Bree says that, I'll read her note. I found your podcast recently and was hoping you could help guide me to an episode that would be helpful. And we did that, but I'll tell you the circumstances of her situation, because there's many points that it would be useful for us to comment on here. I recently lost my puppy. My 18-month-old puppy was hit by a car when my dad was watching him. And I just moved across country the day before. I had only had him for 5 months, but I was incredibly attached, as you could imagine. I live alone, and since most of it was during a lockdown, he was the only soul I saw for months. I don't find comfort in thinking about a good long life and lots of memories because he was so young. He wasn't sick, and he died because of someone's bad decision in the moment. which we all do, by the way. All of us make mistakes, and I think it's really important for that to be pointed out. Because I just moved, there's no place here that he really existed. There's nothing here that connects Bree to his memory, and she can't find comfort. And so those are the points. And there's lots of issues there. And Nancy, do you want to start?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, it was a pandemic, and this dog was her companion.
Yeah,
she lives alone, and she's single, lives alone, and that dog was with her for those 5 months, and that's obviously why she was so incredibly attached. I mean, she would be attached anyway, but it meant so much more. And she just moved, so that was a stressor to begin with. So
huge stressor. One of the most profound stressors in life is a move of residence, change in residence.
And then she, I guess, was doing something away from the home, and the puppy was there. And unfortunately, as we just said, there was an accident. Her father, we don't know exactly the circumstances, but the puppy did get out of the house and was hit by a car. And so here she lost her puppy, but she also has the complication of someone she loves who, unfortunately, there was an accident around. So here's her father, who we know didn't mean anything to harm that puppy, and I can't imagine, he must have a lot of feelings about that, but it created also a lot of feelings in her.
Yeah, and when I think about that, one of the things that comes to mind is when somebody makes an error in judgment or an oversight, and it has a tragic response that we're so very tied to, our heart is so tied to, it can sometimes help to get the feelings out, but not necessarily directly at them. And one of the mechanisms for doing that is to write a letter as though you're writing it to that person. So in her case, Bree's case, to write a letter to her father without the intention of sending it to him, in which she lets out all of what she's thinking and all of her concerns, all of her mixed feelings, I'm imagining, all of her questions, and just gets it all out, writes it down, and then puts it away for a little bit, puts it aside, and then perhaps comes back to it in a week or so and revisits it and maybe writes it again. And this is a process that can help a person to sort of work through all of the reactions they're having in response to that person's role in the loss of their beloved companion. And again, I wouldn't recommend that you actually send the letter. You may at some point down the road, because I think it'll actually, in most cases, the tenor of the letter might change. But there's something to be gained in getting all of this out.
You want to move it out, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And now she will be alone again, and she wanted to know more about sudden death. Well, it's tragic. There's a lot more denial. There's a lot more shock. I mean, and that will take a period of time to move out of her. And at some point, it will be really more raw when she, comes to the realization that the puppy isn't coming back. And so, and that's hard to have when you're alone,
It's so hard, yeah. Because when you're alone, when you live alone with an animal companion or animal companions, many times they center your lives. They mean home. They are your home.
They are your home.
In a very fundamental, heartfelt way. And that's quite a process of adjusting to. And one of the things she said that I found striking as well is that the physical surroundings where she lives now do not hold the memory of Charlie. The puppy's name was Charlie. And so one of the things I suggested to her is to create something that does hold the memory that she can hold close. So maybe a photo album, maybe a a collage, maybe
Yeah.
something on the way of a keepsake shelf that we've talked about, something that is more concrete that she can actually have within her home, or perhaps outside her home. I'm not sure what her circumstances are. Maybe a little garden plot or something like that could be an example as well, that helps her to hold on to Charlie's memory
Right.
in the place where she now lives.
Because we know that Charlie is still with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Spiritually anyway.
Yeah.
He's still in her heart. So now she can create, that space, for him in some kind of physical way, with the beds or the collars or pictures and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. And it's, again, this, when you lose an animal through tragedy like that, a puppy who you had this vision. I mean, we know their lives are not going to be anywhere near the span of a human being, but we expect that they're going to be with us for a decade. That's a reasonable expectation. And sometimes we don't even hit that mark, but to have your puppy taken from you at 18 months is so very difficult. And they would just have to acknowledge that there's a special kind of overlay of distress that might come with that. And so this is very complicated, and many, many questions. And again, the what ifs and why didn't I, and all of that. And
the guilt. I mean, why did I leave that day? Why, why was Dad let the dog out, or however that worked?
Yeah. All the questions that we would never think to ask ourselves, because we're not clairvoyant.
Right.
We don't really know the future. It's kind of like when the week before Isabel died, I kind of noticed a degradation in her condition, and I thought, maybe I should take her to the vet. And then she went into crisis at the end of that week and actually died. And I keep coming back to that.
Why did I do that?
Yeah, and I keep saying to myself, she'd been her condition had been degrading for years. We knew that. We were treating. So there are questions that we ask ourselves in the aftermath that that no human being would actually have thought to ask themselves at the time. Right. We have to be gentle with ourselves.
Exactly.
We ask Bree to be gentle with herself and to try to give herself the same kind of loving support that she would give another person. Exactly. Yeah, it's so hard for us to do, and many of us to do. Not all of us, but many of us, it's very hard to do.
Now, the other thing that we did is, I gave her some resources in the state that she was in. Okay. So I looked up some pet therapy people and, lost the people and some groups and so forth. And I did send it to her so she could reach out.
That's great. That's great.
Now, the second one is from Crystal. And Hamlet was her beautiful dog, and he had gotten sick. I guess he was vomiting a lot, and there wasn't a clue to what that was. And she was trying different treatments, but they were running out of funds, and there were more tests that needed to be done. And I was telling Ken this, that we've never heard of this, but she contacted the ASPCA for a grant.
It's really resourceful.
Which is, I've never heard of it. It's good to know. And they did offer her money. Mm-hmm. And the Hamlet went through the testing. And there were 3 major issues that came up for him. So he started in treatment with different medications. And she was administering those medications as per the veterinarian. However, he was still getting ill. And so he wasn't getting better. It appeared that he was getting worse. She contacted a veterinarian. The problem with that was they needed blood work, and he wasn't well, and to have an infusion. And unfortunately, she ended up, needing to euthanize him. And here's a woman who has 3 little kids and tried to work with her first baby, Hamlet, and make sure that he was getting the treatment, he needed. But it was stressful, right? Because they had to have money, and they got money, and then they had to go treat.
This treatment was thousands of dollars.
Yeah, thousands.
Really thousands of dollars. Yeah.
And so when she wrote us, and I didn't read the whole note that she wrote because it was quite long, so I summarized it, but caused her obviously a tremendous amount of guilt, because she administered the drugs, she followed the veterinarians, and he was still failing. Her questions were, why didn't I see that he needed this before, or on an IV? Why? I could have saved him, maybe. I needed to go to a different vet right away. Maybe I waited too long at one vet, needed to go to a different vet. Maybe if I had gotten more money, I could have gone to a better facility. I shouldn't have given him the food that made him sick in the beginning, which, that was her read of it. She had, I guess.
We're not really sure where it all began. As we frequently, we tie the beginning of illness to something that happened just before. Like maybe we gave a different kind of food, or maybe there was, they were outside and they seemed to be licking the grass, something off the grass or something like that. But it's hard to know exactly where this may have started the way we're thinking about it, because there was so much infirmity happening, it seemed, all at once.
And it was quick. I mean, there were so many things, obviously, by the time that they got the testing that they found out about, and who knows how each one of those situations was reacting with the other. Mm-hmm. The other thing that happened was, at the time, I think that her stress level was so high, and she was so overwhelmed, and she was so grieving because she was anticipating what was going to happen, and then she ended up having to euthanize, that she chose a communal cremation.
Oh yes, yeah.
And so, and then after that, she says, why did I do that? Are they treating him? Did they treat his body with dignity? Did they treat his body with respect? Why did I do this? Mm-hmm. And reading this and the detailed story that she wrote, I mean, her guilt was palpable, and her stress level was so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because here she is trying to live her life with her kids and having all this go on at the same time, and this Hamlet was her first baby,
Yeah, he was only 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and she was she did. You want to say to her immediately, like with Brie, you did the best you could.
Oh my gosh, we see this all the time. The people who go so far above and beyond, like racking their brains to figure out, like doing research on their own through many different means, and checking in with second and third opinion. I mean, doing the kind of stuff that we would hope our loved ones would do for us if we were in failing health. And then, because they're so conscientious, when they aren't able to save their loved one's life, they start blaming themselves.
Yeah.
It's like this. We see this all the time, that people who bend over backwards and put everything they've got into it, and then they're the same people who are guilt-ridden. Yeah. And it's just part of the nature of being an extraordinarily conscientious caregiver, that when actually everything fails, we are still thinking, what should I have done better? What should I have done more?
And now with some of the information she knew, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I see this?
Yeah.
Why did I make this decision? And the guilt, you and I know that the guilt is the hardest emotion to go through.
Yeah, it really, really is. And it's like you just have to keep. And I'm still doing this, mentioning this to Tim with some regularity. Tim is my husband, of course, and I'll say, shouldn't I have taken Isabel to the vet this last week, or maybe the week before, and he's like, we knew she was dying. We knew she was dying for a really long time, but still you have to ask the questions. You have to put it out there. You have to hear yourself say it like so many times before eventually you're just in a different place with it. It's just not as raw. And then another thing I want to say is the question she had about Hamlet's body is so evocative for me of the same kind of thing. I might have mentioned this to you offline, Nancy. So when Isabel died, my Isabel died June 19th. So it's still very fresh. And your Molly died very, very recently as well in April. And so the vet gave us, because Tim was away traveling and coming back in a couple of days, the vet gave us her body in a box, and it was very nicely, it looked very much like a casket. It was a cardboard box, and it was taped, and they put a little flower in it, and I put it in an auxiliary freezer that we had. And I had sat with Isabel's dead body for probably a half hour or so after the doctor came in and listened to her heartbeat. So, I mean, she was deceased. There was no question about it. And they put her in the box, and I have to tell you, I had this thought when I got home, oh my God, should I go and open the box? Is she really dead?
Yeah, right.
And
I need to know for sure.
And I thought that was so but it was so powerful. And I'm thinking about Crystal's thought of, did they handle her body with respect? Yeah. Like, it's the same kind of thing. Like, did I do the right thing? And then at the same, like, you have these thoughts that just intrude, and they're incredibly powerful. But then you have to just remind yourself, this is what happens when we're grieving. Yeah. This is what happens. And I had to say to myself, she was dead. There's nothing you can do. She was gone.
But we don't want them to be dead.
Yeah, we don't want to be in it. And it's like, is she struggling to get out of the box? Yeah. And with Hamlet's cases, did they handle his body? Like, did they really treat him with respect? And, we have to assume that they did. Yeah. The rational part of us says they're a professional organization. They're doing the right things. We entrusted them. But the irrational part of our grief is playing havoc, is all over the place with, like, all of the, it's stirring up, it's provoking us in every way, because there's just this piece about guilt, and did I really do enough, and did I do it right, and am I certain that she's actually gone, or he's actually gone? It's just the way it works for so many of us.
Yeah, we talk, guilt, like we said, is probably the hardest, emotion. And the problem is that we can't take it away from anyone. You can't take their guilt away. And so in the group, what we would do is, someday we hope that you can forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Because, you did everything possible.
Right. I mean, you reinforce that, and you have other people listen, and they go, and you're like, what, did she miss anything, or did he miss anything? And they're like, I can't imagine they did. No. I mean, now we look back and say, shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Well, it's always Monday morning quarterbacking. I mean, we can always go back and beat ourselves up, by the way. This is probably what guilt does. Beat ourselves up. And I can't imagine putting myself in her place. She had to move on. She had children to take care of, and she worked, and having to deal with all of this with her first beloved baby it's so incredibly overwhelming. And then, of course, you do the best you can.
Yep.
And
that's all you can do. And you just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Yes. And when you need to cry, you cry. And when you need to be angry, you get angry. And you hold as much as possible the idea that most helping professionals do the best they can as well. Most of them are using the information that they're seeing, and they're treating their patients with their best judgment. And when you're getting second and third opinions, you have to imagine that they're all doing the best they can, and that it's complicated. You're in a complicated case.
Yes, especially, I mean, my Hank had 3 different issues that he was dealing with for a long time. He was diabetic, he was epileptic, he was anemic. I mean, there were so many things going on with him, and you hope that you trust that the veterinarians are doing what they're supposed to do,
Right.
but it's complicated, and is one issue was the diabetes affecting, with Rosie when she died, she had cancer and she had kidney disease. She couldn't get the chemo because the chemo would kill the kidneys.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's all these complexities
Yep.
sometimes with animals. But I do want to say that we really thank Bree and we really thank Crystal. And we want them to know that they are the best moms. And that the Hamlet and Charlie don't hold any grudges. They just loved their moms. And so in the pain that Bree and Crystal are having, they have to know that those dogs are in their hearts, and they will always be there, even though they can't touch them anymore.
Yeah, and that the process takes time, and you just want to be. I say this so much because I think it's so important that we have to try to find a way to be gentle with ourselves and not allow ourselves to be carried away in guilt and misgivings and the what ifs, and let yourself go there a little bit. Write the stuff down, put it aside. Some people, one of the things that I'll advise people, and sometimes they'll laugh, is say, write down all what you're thinking, put it in a freezer.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's an interesting one. I haven't heard the freezer.
Yeah, put it in a plastic bag, put it in the freezer. Because then you can say, okay, that's where it is. And then in a little while, when you feel like you absolutely have to add to it, you take it out of the freezer, put it aside, and then you write, because it's a concrete way of freezing it.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly.
And putting it aside. You know it's there, but it's not inside. It's not entirely inside yourself anymore. And anything that gets it out and gives you a little bit of distance can give you a little bit of solace sometimes. Different things work for different people, but that's something that you can try, and it just takes time. It just takes time.
It's unfortunate that it takes time because it's painful, but it's best that we go through it as best we can.
Yep. So I guess we're toward the end of our time, Nancy. I want to let people know as well that we're not going to do a live broadcast next week. So I'm going to be traveling, and we're going to just ask you to join us in 2 weeks. And also to know that you can watch these videos on YouTube. You can listen on Apple, on Spotify, on Anchor, on one of the podcast outlets. And hopefully, if you would like to hear a program, if it would be useful for you, you can choose one that we've already done and then rejoin us again in 2 weeks.
And we want to tell everyone and really appreciate those who write in, especially with these more difficult situations, that they wanted them to be known so that it could help some other people. Yeah. And for all of you who have lost and are losing and they're beloved, we know that this is a really hard thing to go to, and we appreciate any feedback that you have or any questions.
Right. So Nancy, as always, it's great having this conversation with you, and I'll look forward to talking with you on this broadcast in 2 weeks. Maybe we'll talk before that in the interim.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.